2824 Civil Engineering. Just a few moments before Bloodwave and the uninvited guest appeared in the runic hall of the Night Garden, Jet, who had been looking at her fellow saints with a wary expression, smiled suddenly. She turned to Nightwalker. "You know what? I think I'll take that shift, after all. You look exhausted." He raised an eyebrow. "Oh, really?" Jet was already stepping into the runic circle. She maintained an easy smile as a cold shiver ran down her spine. "What's this? You don't seem happy at all." After complaining so much, she patted him on the shoulder and gently pushed him out of the circle. Nightwalker seemed a little reluctant, but he did not have a reason to refuse, so he left without saying anything. By then, the silhouettes of two people were already forming in the air. As the captain of the Night Garden, Jet was always connected to it. However, that connection was usually subtle and vague, existing in the deep periphery of her subconscious mind. It was only when she stepped into the runic circle that the connection opened fully, allowing her to share the feelings of the living ship and exert precise control over it. Now, too, she suddenly both remained herself and became a vast presence that bathed in the nurturing heat of divine flames as her body sheltered and nurtured millions of living beings in turn. Time seemed to slow down for a moment. Jet could only see the vague silhouettes of Bloodwave and the civil engineer he was supposed to bring as they were manifested in the dream realm. However, the Night Garden felt their arrival far more deeply. One was familiar and caring. The other was a stranger, his presence as vast as an ocean and full of endless, insatiable hunger, and kinship, as well. The stranger bore the scent of Heart God and its sacred forest. Jet's smile faltered. "A civil engineer, my foot." Before she could react, Bloodwave and the man he carried across the realm boundary fully materialized on the floor of the runic hall. The supposed engineer was tall and imposing, looking at her with two radiant golden eyes. He was none other than Supreme Astarion, the Dreamspawn, in the flesh. Jet felt her blood running cold. She had expected an ambush, but she had not expected that. As Astarion looked around the bridge of the Night Garden with curiosity, the other saints, Knave, Aether, Bloodwave, Tiras, Roan, and even Nightwalker, bowed. "Welcome, my lord." The corner of Jet's mouth twitched as she spared Nightwalker a dark look. Him too, after all the torment and horror he had endured because of the Dreamspawn. Or had he been a thrall of the Dreamspawn this whole time? No, it couldn't be. Jet's mood soured. Still, she mentally patted herself on the back. Her distrust of the other saints had turned out to be justified. If there was one thing that had never failed her in this life, it was paranoia. Finally, Astarion's gaze settled on Jet. She met it steadily, trying her best not to appear rattled. He smiled. "Ah, Soul Reaper Jet. What a charming nickname. It is a pleasure to meet you. Oh, but you don't seem to be surprised to see me at all." Jet remained silent for a few moments, then forced on a faint smile of her own. "On the contrary, I am quite shocked." She glanced at the saints that were scattered around the runic hall, surrounding her, and shrugged. "I was expecting that the 6 of them would try to subdue me with an unexpected attack. Never in my wildest dreams did I imagine that Lord Astarion himself would come to deal with this humble transcendent." He chuckled. "A humble transcendent? Please, don't sell yourself short." Astarion studied Jet with a hint of amusement in his golden eyes. "I've met all kinds of people, you know. Powerful people, cunning people, great masters of warfare and the like, even people whose main virtue was that they were inexplicably lucky, which made them more dangerous than all the rest. And among all those people, you'd still rank as one of the most impressive, Miss Jet." Jet scoffed. "What is this, flattery?" He shrugged. No, I'm simply stating the facts. Everyone has a weakness, you see. But not all weaknesses can be easily exploited. Powerful people, cunning people, lucky people, and great masters of all kinds, dealing with them poses no problem at all. To tell you the truth, I wasn't planning to act personally at this stage, since delegating tasks to my subordinates was more than sufficient." Astarion sighed. "But no matter how much I tried, I couldn't see a way for them to deal with Soul Reaper Jet. Not without sacrificing more talents than I am willing to sacrifice, at least, or without destroying you instead of making you mine. It is quite an accomplishment, really. I can't believe that we all overlooked such a gem, all those years ago." He looked at Jet and smiled brightly. "So, I had to come and deal with you myself. There are only 2 transcendents who managed to make me act personally, by the way." "Well done." Jet studied him with a concerned expression. "What an honor." Astarion laughed. "I feel a note of sarcasm in your voice, but actually, it is indeed an honor." You should feel proud. Jet studied him for a few moments, then sighed. You know, people like me, those who grew up in the outskirts, don't like the word honor that much. In fact, one might say that we can't stand it. He raised an eyebrow, looking at her with curiosity. The outskirts. I am sorry, but I am not familiar with the term. Is that something from your world? A grin slowly bloomed on Jet's lips. Right, you're not from Earth, so you might not know. Yes, it's a term from the waking world. The outskirts are where the non-citizens lived, and they had a peculiar culture. People from the outskirts, those who live long enough to escape them, at least, are known to be distrustful, vicious, cynical, and tenacious. They often share common traits, as well. She took a deep breath and glanced around the runic hall, chillingly evaluating the sovereign and the 6 saints that surrounded her. Like, for example, the runes of the circle shimmered faintly, and a subtle change spread across the hall. Jet smiled darkly. They tend to never enter a room without an exit strategy. 2825 exit strategy. A while back, Jet had asked herself if she would be able to kill the 6 saints aboard the Night Garden if they were to conspire against her. She had also asked herself what she would do if the entire population of the living ship was taken hostage or turned on her. The answer to the first question was, yes, probably. She could not be sure, but deep down, she knew that they would not survive a battle against her. Her aspect was simply too lethal, and the gap in physical prowess between her and the rest of the saints was simply too vast. In that regard, she was closer to a supreme than to a transcendent. Besides all that, she was simply a killer. That innate quality was hard to define or measure, but those who knew its fatal scent could easily distinguish between those who possessed it and those who did not. Needless to say, the former was many times more dangerous. It was just that slaying 6 powerful saints would not help anyone. Whether she managed to kill them or not, humanity would suffer a grievous loss, so, what was the point in trying? As for the second question, Jet was honestly not sure. She did, however, know that if things ever came to that, the battle would have already been lost. And while she would have fought for the cause of her people to the last drop of blood if there was the smallest possibility of victory, only a fool would continue to bleed themselves dry in a battle that had already ended in defeat. Saving herself to fight another day was an option, too, even if it meant surrendering the Night Garden and millions of souls to the enemy. After all, she would not be able to snatch them from Astarion's grasp even if she stayed. So, Jet had been hoping for the best while preparing for the worst possible outcome in secret. She was ready to escape instead of fighting the 6 saints. Sadly, she had really not expected that Astarion would come for her personally. His presence here complicated things. A lot. Looking at Jet, Astarion chuckled. It does complicate things, doesn't it? Jet's expression darkened. She remained silent for a few seconds, then said in a disgruntled tone. It's impolite to read a lady's private thoughts. Astarion simply shrugged. It's also impolite to cast all your thoughts and emotions outward as if you were screaming at the top of your lungs, constantly, incessantly, for everyone to hear. Noise, 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 you people are noisy enough to drive a person mad. It's deafening. I spent a long time learning how to stay sane in the endless cacophony of your souls. His lips twisted into a friendly smile. So, forgive me for taking a peek at your plans of escape. Granted, you've been cunning enough to hide the details of how exactly you were going to run away even from your own mind, but that shouldn't matter too much. The friendly smile suddenly seemed menacing. Should it, Miss Jet? Jet blinked, having caught herself staring into his golden eyes. Wait, what had she been thinking about? Jet knew that she had prepared an escape strategy. However, no matter how much she tried to remember what it was, she couldn't. It was as if there was an empty space in her mind where her plan had been, or possibly a tall wall that prevented her from accessing these thoughts. She tried to hide her fear and glanced at Astarion with the same concerned expression. That's a neat trick. However, do you really think that you can keep me here against my will? I am quite good at improvising as well, you know. Astarion laughed. I know, but why would you want to leave? Jet blinked again, confused. Indeed, why would she want to leave? She vaguely remembered wanting to escape, but could not comprehend why. This was her citadel, after all. Her people were here, her home was here, too, as well as her beautiful garden. There seemed to be no reason to leave the Night Garden, and every reason to stay. Astarion sighed in satisfaction. There, that's better. Jet glanced at him in a daze. No, wait, something is not right here. It felt like she had forgotten something. But what was it? She couldn't put her finger on it. The other saints moved, slowly getting closer to the runic circle. Astarion took a step forward, as well, his golden eyes holding her gaze. Now, let us. But before he could finish the sentence, something strange happened. Instead of landing on the wooden floor, his foot seemed to sink into it, making Astarion stumble. An expression of surprise appeared on his face, replaced a moment later by a pained grimace. Miss Jet, is your ship trying to eat me, by any chance? Astarion, Nightwalker, and the rest of the saints were slowly sinking into the floor, as if it were quicksand instead of solid wood. Watching that, Jet frowned thoughtfully. Then, she smiled. Ah, I remember now. The plan I improvised. Astarion stared at her for a moment, then snarled. He moved, and the wooden floor around him exploded into splinters. At the same time, Nightwalker, who had been standing closest to Jet, flicked his wrist, sending an ominously gleaming throwing knife at her. The enchanted knife hit Jet in the chest, and passed through her, as if flying through mist. Shishi gave him a bitter look. Bastard, we'll talk about it later. In the next moment, Astarion was standing near her, his hand stretching forward to grab her neck. But before he could, Jet vanished without a trace, as if she had never been there. At the same time, she appeared far below, on the main deck of the Night Garden. Jet lost her balance, fell into a roll, and slid a few meters before jumping to her feet. All around her, hundreds of people, thousands, possibly, were all staring at her with ominous expressions. Some of them were mundane, some were awakened, and more than a few were masters. All of them, however, seemed to have been enthralled by the dreamspawn already. I'm surrounded by zombies. No, was she the zombie? Now that Jet was far away from the dreamspawn, her mind seemed to have been freed from the hex. So, she could remember what she had been planning to do, and why. Escape. Huh, it was easier said than done when a demented sovereign was hot on her heels. 2826 Delegated Escape. Jet realized that all her plans had become meaningless the moment she felt Astarion's presence through the Night Garden. Dealing with 6 powerful saints was already difficult enough. Dealing with 6 saints and a damn supreme on top of that was, well above her pay grade. Now that Astarion boarded the Night Garden, executing her escape would be all but impossible, and on top of that, his aspect granted him frightening powers. The second he appeared in the runic hall, he would be able to read her mind and learn how exactly she was planning to get away. Even worse, he would be able to manipulate her very thoughts, twisting them and turning her own mind against her. Jet prided herself on being paranoid, but now, she couldn't even trust her ZLF. She had to improvise an entirely new plan of escape in the brief moment between the vague silhouettes of Bloodwave and Astarion appearing in the runic hall and them fully crossing the realm boundary, manifesting in the dream realm. Not only that, but she had to make that plan impervious to the POGS of the malevolent sovereign, somehow. So, she did just that. By the time Astarion laid eyes on her, the new plan had already been put in place. Jet also made an effort to focus all her thoughts on the old one, forbidding herself from thinking about anything else. It seemed to be working, for now. She had not been certain that it would. Her new plan was quite simple, but also innately devious in its simplicity. It relied on a single proposition, that while Astarion could manipulate and deceive her own mind, even he could not manipulate the vast, slumbering mind of the Night Garden. The Night Garden was not just any ship, after all. It was a living ship, and while it did not quite possess a consciousness in the way people understood the concept, it was not truly mindless either. So, in that brief moment before Astarion appeared in the runic hall, Jet gave the Night Garden a simple command. Protect its captain. That was why the Dreamspawn and the saints he had subjugated suddenly started to sink into the floor. The mainmast pagoda and the floor of the runic hall were carved from the same wood as the hull of the living ship. The Night Garden had never absorbed and digested its passengers, but not because it could not. Rather, it was because it had been damaged in the past, and there was no reason to consume the beings it was meant to shelter and nurture anyway. Jet doubted that Astarion and the saints would be seriously harmed by that simple defensive measure, but they had at least been slowed down at a decisive moment. Next, the Night Garden sent her away from the runic hall, where the danger was, to its main deck. Jet suspected that it had opened a miniature portal between the two, just like it could open a vast rift in space to travel from one place to another. So, something like that was possible, too. The sudden break of the connection between Jet and the living ship was a bit jarring, but she swiftly regained her senses. She was standing on one of the outer decks of the Night Garden now, surrounded from all sides by hostile thralls of the Dreamspawn. Astarion was already aware of her current location, no doubt. He would escape the runic hall in a matter of moments, so she needed to run. There was nowhere to run in the sky below, really. The night garden was surrounded by a vast emptiness from all sides, except for one, where a sea of divine flames burned in the darkness. However, Jet was a saint, and saints could always escape across the realm boundary to a different world. It was just that pulling on one's tether required time and concentration. Jet had little time and could not afford to focus entirely on her tether. Still, she had to manage it, somehow. Just when a small figure exploded from the arched portals of the runic hall far above, at the top of the mainmast pagoda, she lunged into a run. She had to buy herself more time, and there was only one way to do it. From where she stood, only a few hundred meters separated her from the edge of the night garden, beyond which lay the empty dark void, a distance that a saint could breach in the blink of an eye. When people moved to bar her way, Jet simply turned into a mist and flowed past them, rushing toward the railing. However, bizarrely, it took her several seconds just to move a few dozen steps. Jet cursed. Nightwalker, that old lecher. The legendary saint was twisting space to increase the distance between her and the dark void. He couldn't stop her entirely, but he could slow her down. Somewhere above her, two flying figures dove out of the towering pagoda following the first. They were Tiras and Roan, without a doubt. Behind her, meanwhile, Astarion landed on the deck of the night garden like a meteor. Damn it! Jet poured a roaring torrent of essence into her muscles. Her dead body was special, as it could absorb far more essence than the flesh of the living could, so she could move faster than almost any saint, streaking across the deck like lightning. But not as swift as Astarion was moving as he lunged after her. The Dreamspawn did not even seem to run, he simply blinked out of existence at one spot and appeared in the next. In the blink of an eye, he was already upon her. It was then that the night garden suddenly tilted, throwing Astarion off balance while simultaneously pushing Jet toward her goal. She leapt onto a colossal cannon that stood in front of the railing, then jumped into the empty space below. An arrow pierced her shoulder at the last moment, wounding her and making her bleed. Jet was spun around as she fell, witnessing the radiant sight of the countless lanterns that illuminated the night garden for the last time. Goodbye, my wondrous ship. Thank you, I hope we'll meet again. Then, she plummeted down, into the depths of the sky below, and the fierce radiance of the ocean of flame that burned beneath her. This is going to hurt. Watching two enormous figures, a magnificent bird of prey and a winged lion, diving to catch her, Jet focused on her tether. She fell, and fell, and fell. As she did, the blinding radiance of divine flames grew more intense around her. The heat was suffocating at first. Then, when Jet crossed the invisible barrier of the living ships Aegis, it became lethal. Her armor ignited, and a terrible pain flooded her mind. The talons of the enormous Thunderbird were moments away from snatching her. But in the end, failed to reach her. Burning, Jet fell into the sea of flames. Wonder. A moment later, she rolled across cold concrete in a cloud of smoke and crashed into a cracked wall, shattering it entirely. As pieces of concrete and dust fell on her from above, Jet coughed and let out a pained groan. Am I the first saint to escape from a supreme? No, come to think of it, Cassie had escaped too. Astarion seemed to have terrible luck with catching saints. Jet, on the other hand, had been quite lucky. She had returned to the waking world.